Person-environment fit, Hogan and Roberts model. Personality psychology, Professor Michael Botwin, Department of Psychology, California State University, Fresno. We're going to now look at a proposed model of person-environment fit that was devised by Robert Hogan and Brent Roberts. It includes 3 primary dimensions for the interaction: personality, situation, and the interactions themselves. Now, let's define these things before we look at the model per se. Hogan says personality consists of 2 things: your reputation, which is basically what other individuals think of you, and your identity, which is what you think of yourself. The second component is the situation, and the situation consists of roles and agendas. Now, there are 2 kinds of roles. Roles that you define. Are you going to be the teacher, the mentor, the student, the learner, the parent, the child, etc.? Or roles that are defined by other individuals, maybe through being granted a title such as student, or even maybe one like professor, or whatever role other people give you. It doesn't have to be a formal job title. Second, with situations, we have the agendas. What do people want to get out of this interaction? Do they want to get something? Do they want to do something for a person? All of those kinds of things come into play. And then finally, you have the interaction itself. Now, if you remember back to our lecture on personality traits, you can see that the first 2 parts of interaction are status and affiliation. Yes, those are the same 2 dimensions that Wiggins' circumplex model has in terms of getting along and getting ahead. So who has status, who is dominant over the other individual if that's the case? Affiliation, how well do the people get along in the interaction? And then finally, intimacy. How close are the 2 people? How intimate, how well do they know each other? So, these 3 dimensions fit into the schematic we'll see in the next slide that I will build through, and I'll show you a bunch of lines, then I will fill in the boxes and give you an example of this. Let's look at the Hogan and Roberts model of PE Fit. It's called a socioanalytic model, which is Hogan's kind of discussion of evolutionary perspectives. So let's fill in the boxes here and make these arrows make some kind of sense. So first of all, we have the elements that make up a person's reputation. You can see there's some trait descriptive adjectives here to use as examples here. So what is a reputation? It's the person outgoing. Are they nice? Are they intelligent, hardworking, nervous, etc.? This basically is what we would call observer data, the data someone else is telling us about a target. Secondly, we have the person's personality themselves. This consists of things such as motives, values, goals, personality traits, things like that. This is essentially self-report data. Now, we get our reputation from inputs from groups or societies. What do other people say about us? And these might end up in things like the roles we play. Are you a boss? Are you a subordinate, a son, a daughter, teacher, student, etc.? In any interaction, people take on specific roles. Now, in any interaction, there's also an agenda. And there are two kinds of agendas, a public agenda and a private agenda. The private agenda is usually what a person is wanting without expressing that desire publicly. A public agenda is something that is just, as it says, public, open, something that's out in the open. What do you want based on this interaction? Next part is the actor's expectations for the interaction. What do the individuals expect to get out of interacting with each other? And this feeds into how the scenario may play out. Are the two individuals going to compete with each other? Are they going to get along and affiliate? Or are they going to avoid each other? Then there are consequences for the interaction. First of all, in the top box, what are the consequences for the interactions from the observer's perspective? This is other people observing your interaction. What do they think is going to be the result? And then on the bottom, what are the consequences of the interaction from the actor's perspective? What has resulted from the interaction? What has each person gained, lost, or gotten or not gotten out of the interaction? Then finally, there's the observer's expectations for the interaction. What do other people see as the interaction? What do they expect is going to happen? And you can see all the feedback loop arrows and all the good stuff. So let me give you an example using this model. Oftentimes I'm asked by students to write letters of recommendation for them for graduate programs, for jobs, and things like that. You usually go to people who you think will write good letters of recommendation, and I've got a reputation for writing good letters. At least that's part of my identity. I think I'm a very good letter writer in terms of pushing students towards their future goals. When a student comes and asks me for a letter, we are playing out the roles. Usually it's the student-mentor relationship. And sometimes students come and ask me for a letter, but they come in and they start by kind of sidestepping the issue. They'll ask me how my family is doing, how's school going, how's the semester going, how are my dogs, how's my wife, anything but, can I have a letter? And usually they're working their way up to that. If I see that, oftentimes I will ask them, I bet you came in for a letter of recommendation, and you can see the anxiety and stress relieve them. Well, the students are asking me for a letter because I think it's going to be effective in getting them to their future goals. If I really like you, and I've worked closely with you, and I know you very well, you're probably going to get what I call a walk-on-water letter of recommendation. And my longest letters of recommendation are 4 or 5 pages, single-spaced, 1-inch margins, where they extol on the virtues of people that I've worked with in my lab for several years. And they tend to be pretty good at getting students to their goals. On the other far end of things, I'll oftentimes have a student come into my office and want a letter of recommendation, but I really don't know them at all. They might have been in a class with me and gotten a good grade, but not maybe even said anything all semester. So they get what I call a mercy letter of recommendation, and it's just basically a paragraph saying that so-and-so was a good kid, they got a good grade in my class, and they didn't cause any trouble. And there's all kinds of gradients of my letters in between. But you can see how all of this kind of letter writing agenda comes forth in this model. You have the roles, you have the agenda for the interaction, you have the expectations for the interaction. Do you think you're going to be successful? Do you think not? Sometimes I'll have a student come in for a letter of rec, and I'll have to give them the bad news that their record is probably not going to get them into a graduate program, but I'll write them a mercy letter anyway if it'll help them out. So as students get my letters and as they find out whether they work or not, other students see this and it feeds into reputation. If I write a really good letter of recommendation for a student and they get into a program that they want to get into, it makes me feel better because I've helped someone reach their goals, so it's changed my identity. And if I am writing letters that are successful for students, it's going to motivate me to do even better in the future. You could play out just about any scenario you would like using Hogan and Roberts' model here, and it doesn't have to be just between two people. It can be between a group of people here, but I'm just giving you the most simple case of this model. This has been a We Have Couches video production, 2020. Copyright Professor Michael D. Botwin. Bye now.